I'm thinking something like. Hi, pretty angel, baby of my life.
Will you greet me that way every time?
Of course.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for getting the guest that we had today.
You're welcome.
I love her. Her name is Dr. Laura Anderson.
Yes.
She specializes in religious trauma.
And high control systems.
Okay, nice. Yeah. Oh my God. It was like an old school 80s like action film. Every time she talks, I was like, ugh, ugh, ugh. Like I was just getting fucking beat, dog. I just kept saying, I gotta go. I want to, can I come? I gotta go see you. Yeah. And talking to my therapist, my therapist would be like, ooh, that sounds, we've made the connections.
Yeah.
But like listening to Laura, she's so wise, so smart, such a way with
knows her
words.
stuff, yeah.
She does.
And she explains it very eloquently that you can receive and hear. I like that she said the part about, like, she gave it some different things, different words. And one way of looking at it and talking about how your system,
Yes.
you embodied it.
Yes.
And it's I had another client one time say, I'm not just deconstructing, I have to decode.
Oof.
And that
Yes.
reminded me when she said we embody that and our nervous systems pick up on things and respond in ways. So I think that your nervous system was responding to the thing.
It sure was. It sure was. It was kind of nice though to be like, it was like, but it was like, oh, cool. There's a source, and that's a good feeling to be like, oh, it's something I can address.
No,
So that's
I
cool.
love that.
Yeah, so many gems in this, man.
Yeah, I think you're going to resonate with a lot of it.
Truly,
Because I'm sure you or someone you know has experienced this. So
100%.
yeah, she has a book coming out or is out. I know she shares some of her personal stories in it, and yeah, really helpful if you've experienced any kind of high control religion in any kind. It doesn't have to be just religion, but she talked about we talk about a little bit everything. But yeah.
And let us know if you if this resonates with you. Please send us DMs. You guys do all the time, but we love getting those DMs. So DM us, share it with a friend. We really appreciate the support and the connection with y'all. So enjoy the episode.
Enjoy.
Oh,
Like
stop!
angels.
Stop it.
Thank you.
Laura,
Yeah.
you are so cool.
I know.
Yeah, this is my first time meeting you, but I feel like you can dance.
I mean, yes.
I knew it. I knew the vibes.
How do I not know this? You dance?
I do. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so good. I'm so good. It just, the vibes are like the way you dress and you're just vibes. I'm like, she can hold rhythm.
Yeah, I do hold rhythm. Yes.
Let's go.
Yes.
Do you love to dance?
I do. I don't do it as much as I want to, but I am trying. It is like, it's one of those things every year where it's like, this is going to be the year. And we're almost to May, so it still could be the year.
What kind of dance do you like to do?
Pretty much anything. I mean, truly. When I don't even know how old I did train to be a ballroom dance instructor.
Wow.
But when I was in high school, I was a cheerleader because that was the closest I could get to dance because I wasn't allowed to dance. But this was like athletic dancing, so that
You weren't allowed to dance?
No, that's like devil.
Of the devil.
There's like gyrating, and like devils could come out of there.
Wow. That would be kind of hardcore.
You just never know.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Well, it's a good intro into why you're here and what you are here to talk about. You just released a book. So I was like, yes, she's going to come talk about all of her stuff.
Yeah, you just released a book?
In October, so about 6 months ago.
Oh, tell us about it.
Yeah.
It's a book on religion when it hurts you. It's called When Religion Hurts You. Yes. Healing from Religious Trauma and the Impact of High Control Religion.
Whoa.
Yes.
And then you have a whole practice based around doing that kind of work and supporting people
Yes.
that have experienced that.
This is true. This is weird. I feel like I don't know.
Sorry.
Look, it's all
Whoever you feel
Look wherever you
comfortable
want.
looking at.
Yeah, there's also people there too.
Oh, hi.
It's hard for me to do that. Yes.
Can you talk about like how you grew up? I'm interested.
Where would you like me
You're
to
like,
start?
It's like a long thing. Well, share a little bit just as before we get started, like kind of what you do. Tell us a little, everybody, a little bit about
Yeah.
what you do.
So I am a licensed psychotherapist here in Nashville. I have a very teeny tiny practice of clients here in Nashville. And I also am a supervisor. That's how I met Melanie.
Yes.
And I also mentor other people who are becoming supervisors. I run a company, the Center for Trauma Resolution and Recovery, which is an online trauma coaching company. And we have practitioners and clients all over the country. Well, and clients technically all over the world. And that's where
Whoa.
we see people who are coming out of high control religions, fundamentalism, purity culture, adverse religious experiences, really light, easy stuff that they're going through coming out of religion. And so we chose a coaching modality for a variety of reasons, which is a whole other soapbox.
Yeah.
But it's wonderful. And so I run that. And so it's awesome. We've got incredible practitioners that practice from body-based trauma modalities and do incredible work with clients on every continent outside of Antarctica.
That's awesome. I didn't know it had that big of a reach.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we're recording, let's see, on the April 29th, and on May 1st, it'll be 3 years that we'll have been open.
Wow.
That's amazing.
So yeah.
Are you from here?
I'm not. I'm originally from Minnesota, but
Oh,
I moved
hell
here almost 14 years ago.
Oh, so now
pretty
you're
much
from
I'm
here.
like
Yeah.
from here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she trained me to be a supervisor, and because of one, you're a kick-ass trauma therapist.
Thank
like she's very well known as a I don't like using the word expert, but
Yeah.
if I did, you would get it. Like she's she knows her shit, and then has that specialty, and that was what really like I liked those things combined because you just see it so much, and I was still learning around that. So
I was about to say, when
helping
y'all
me-
met, were you still kind of like in the church, not in the church, but like still like considered yourself a Christian? And
we started right at the beginning of COVID, which was right
Yeah.
when I started deconstructing a few months, maybe, or to 6 months before that. And then was just kind of when COVID hit and just all the messaging that was happening from the church, I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore. So I kind of just, it had a reason to take a break. And then I started exploring my own stuff.
yeah.
So it was
okay.
probably around the same time.
Yeah.
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 Amazing. Good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can you tell me your whole life story?
Amber asked great questions.
Born at a very young age.
Okay, same. Relate. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna look this up. I know I keep getting in your space.
No, it's fine. It feels like it just keeps like
but it just
going
needs to go
everywhere.
up a little bit.
I swear I'm not touching it. It's trying to get down to the demons.
I know.
They're coming.
We had a very tall person,
Ah.
and then I adjusted it earlier today.
Perfect.
And I adjusted it too much.
Perfect.
There. We want
Yeah.
you eating the microphone.
Okay.
Oh. It's just like so good. Okay.
I'm gonna just talk and like you guys just like get in there and do what you need to.
Just like old school.
Put it right up in my face.
Okay. So
Okay.
Life story.
High level. I was born and
I really want to know like what led you to this point to be your whole job is like about religious trauma.
yeah, I mean I was born into it.
Yeah.
So like I think I was born on a Tuesday and like the next Sunday I was in church.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean I really don't have moments where it wasn't like baked into me. Yeah, when I was very young, I mean, like we were at church whenever it was open, but at a very young age, my dad accepted a position as a camp director at a fundamentalist Christian camp in the middle of Minnesota. So there's some really cool things when you grow up at a camp. Like you've got a horse corral in the backyard and a lake and a ropes course and things that as a kid, that's just like your normal.
That was your home?
That was my home. Like we lived on site.
Okay, that's cool.
So there's some cool things about that.
Yeah.
And then there's some things too where you're like, oh, that's actually really isolating in certain ways where there's you just don't see people for several months out of the year. And we're lucky to go to public school, which I think is probably what kind of quote unquote saved me in terms of being able to have like a touch point to reality. I grew up in a blue state, so education was a different value. My mom is an educator by trade, and so that helped as well. But there's all the weird kind of isolation things. So you get, weird rules and weird dress codes and, it's very much a bubble. And they promote it as such. They're like, camp is a bubble and you come here and you get away from the world.
Yeah.
And we want it to be that way.
Yeah.
And so you make all these weird promises like, your virginity is cool. And, and at the same time, there's this thing sweeping the nation called True Love Waits, which if you're familiar with that, where you pledge your virginity to your future spouse and you sign a card and.
Oh, I signed one.
Yeah.
Same. I had the ring.
Yes. Purity rings. I signed it in 1993 or 94 when I'm late bloomer, I'm in 7th, 8th grade and I'm boys still have cooties and I, don't even know what's happening to the demons aren't coming out of me yet. I'm not gyrating. So, it's just what it is. But yeah. And so that's happening in tandem with all of this. And so you're getting these messages of not only, there's this bubble world, the outside world is very evil, but then these purity culture messages, your body is really evil. Your, women in particular, you make men stumble in lust just simply by showing up. So it's your job to cover up, make sure that, you are always above reproach. There's all these rules, you don't kiss before you get married. At least where I grew up. Yeah. You don't kiss before you get married. And then you might as well just not hold hands or hug or, be alone.
Because if you think about it, it's just as bad as doing it.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Sex is not the problem. Lust is. That was the title of a book,
Dude, you just saying these things, I'm like,
are you sweating?
Just fuck.
Yeah.
Or comparing you to rotted fruit.
Yeah.
If you lose your virginity.
Yeah, like a flower with no petals or chewed up piece of gum or it's just
nobody wants rotting fruit.
Yeah. Yeah, or a burger that has a bite taken out of it.
Jesus.
Yeah.
I know. It's
always food references.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't want an Oreo that's been licked, do you?
I mean, do you?
I remember.
Well, maybe. Is it double stuffed? Because there's probably still some frosting left.
Okay. How amazing. How did you because I'm sure at some point you were on board with this.
Yes-ish. So yeah, what happened was I had this idea that I was going to be a rebel in high school. And then when I got to college, I would turn my life around and give it to God.
Okay.
So, but I couldn't.
You had that planned out?
Right.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, but I couldn't get myself to be the rebel in high school because I was so terrified of the consequences.
Yeah.
Hell.
Yeah.
Right? Because, when you're when that eternal conscience torment is always looming over you, it makes it very difficult to actually do the things that you're not supposed to do. So I didn't. I was a very good kid. I think the worst thing I did was I would skip school regularly my senior year of high school, but I still got great grades. So it's nobody even knew. My dad was the chairman of the school board and he didn't care. So, whatever.
Yeah.
It was fine. So yeah, I graduated from high school and hadn't been the rebel that I wanted to be. But, I kind of had this existential crisis as I was walking out my senior year of high school being okay, I know the world is really big and I think I want to experience it, but I also know that I'm supposed to just be a wife and a mother. And I don't need to go to college. I don't need to have student debt. I'm just supposed to learn how to sew and
Wow.
be a homemaker. And I don't need to rack up student debt and, do all these things. And so what am I supposed to do? And basically every choice from here on out is going to impact the rest of my life, which is technically true for any adult.
Yeah.
Except that when you have, like God on top of all of that, you don't have permission to make mistakes and you don't have permission to just try things and be a normal teenager. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll do like community college, wait for Prince Charming to come and get involved in church. And then on top of it, we have this purity culture thing that's all like lining up. And I really didn't like the books that were coming out. Again, this is like the very beginning. And so we've got I Kissed Dating Goodbye, And the Bride Wore White by Dana Gresh, which is just like literally the worst book ever. And then what is the other one? When God Writes Your Love Story by Eric and Leslie Ludy. All three of which are so highly prescriptive. It's literally like writing out rules. Like, here are the things that you do, and then you will get this reward. And I hated all of it.
Yeah.
But, developmentally, when you're that age, you're like trying to keep your head above water, trying to figure out, how do I live? And so I was like, okay, this feels stable. So I will do this. And I just kind of dove in and I was like, I'll do this and then I'll get this reward. And that feels better than this unknown of like, what is life? I don't really know. So I dove in and then I became a spinster, like at the age of 20,
Damn.
because it didn't work out for me. And that was a lot of shame and everything. But at the same time, I was diving in. I was highly involved at church. I was on paid staff. I was leading young women to do the same thing as me. I did end up getting my bachelor's degree in Christian ministry with an emphasis in Bible and youth ministry, so I was like super Christian and going to all the purity culture conferences. Of course, we didn't call it that back then, because we just called it being godly.
Right.
And
Winterfest.
just, I was like the poster child, and just
While you're
didn't work.
doing that, while you're doing all this, is there something in the back of your mind where you're like, oh no, bro?
I mean, there was moments where I absolutely had questions, but my livelihood was tied to being a professional Christian.
Yeah.
And so I was also smart enough to know, like, if you ask these questions, you will lose everything at that point. And I knew I didn't have what it took to leave all of that. I would have lost everything, my community, my housing, my job, everything. And I knew I couldn't do it yet.
Wow.
And so I just was like, we'll just stay silent at that point. Yeah.
I want to say, when you said that it didn't allow for mistakes, that is so huge, bro. I feel like I'm just marking that for myself. That's something to talk to your therapist about. That's trauma that came up where I'm like, oh, maybe that's why I feel like I can't make mistakes now. Okay.
Yes. I've done that work.
So how did you get from being a professional Christian and doing the things to where you are now?
Yeah.
Like, what was the day where you were like, we're leaving?
When I was working at the church, there really was a lot of like spiritual abuse. I didn't have language for it at the time. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't tell. I was in relationship. We were courting. And the church leadership did not approve of it. Not because we were doing anything bad. He kissed me on the hand. That was as far as we went. He even asked permission. So
Hot.
So hot. It still like gets me all hot and bothered thinking about it. All
You guys seen Bridgerton?
all these years later, I gotta look him up on Facebook or something. And they didn't approve of it, and it really wasn't for any other reason other than they didn't set it up. They weren't the ones that had like picked that person, and because they didn't, and I was like, I'm going to continue moving forward with this relationship, they were like, well, you're sinning because you're going against church leadership. So it was just not a good situation. And because of that, they just started like stripping me of responsibilities, and they started like getting people to spy on me and telling on me and like pulling people away from me in terms of like relationships. And it was not a good situation.
That's heavy.
Yeah. It was
That's like culty a little bit.
It was extremely culty.
Yeah.
Yes, extremely culty. And people would report back to them about me, even if it was not true. But because I had lost any sort of credibility because I was sinning,
Right.
anything that they would say was true and would be rewarded by just like favor, essentially. It wasn't like literally rewarded, but they would be in good standing. And then I would be further punished for what they said. And so it just became a very untenable situation. And finally I was like, I'm done. Like, I have to quit. It was so bad. And so I did. I quit, and I actually ended up breaking up with the guy too, because I knew like this wasn't going to work. For no other reason than I didn't want to date him. And I knew that it had to be a decision that I made, and I didn't want it to come from the church leadership. And ultimately, that led me to working at a job at a college, which I actually really hated, but it was the first time that I had worked in a non-ministry job, and I was respected, and they didn't care what I did on the weekends, and they didn't care what I wore, and they didn't care like really about anything unless I like royally fucked up at my job. But they respected me, and they wanted me to climb the ladder, and they like saw potential in me and liked me, and you know what I mean? Like it was like a normal job, you know? Which I was just like, oh, you don't care that I like didn't go to church? Like that's okay.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was just the most bizarre thing ever. And so it was just enough of like this door of like, I think something's not quite right. But I also felt like I still had to get back into the good graces of the church. And so it was this very weird time where I was like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And so I was trying to get back in the good graces. I still was like, okay, this is very weird. I started applying to go back to school at Liberty University, because obviously, and I did. I actually ended up quitting my job at the college. I went back to school in a hybrid fashion. So I would go to campus for a few weeks at a time and then do the rest of the classes online.
Were you studying Christian stuff?
No, I actually did not do like a Christian counseling program. I did marriage and family therapy, kind of same program that Melanie did, just at a different school.
Okay.
And then I completed that master's degree and was still volunteering all of my time at the church because I still thought I needed to get back on their good side.
The same church?
The same church.
What?
Like they were still just, I mean, I was working 2 part-time jobs just to put myself through school, and they were like demanding more and more time. So I eventually quit my part-time jobs to give more time to the church to try, because they're like, you really messed up by like, dating that guy.
Still holding on to that?
Oh yeah, for years. And I did. I just kept giving more time. But it was through the process of going to school to get my master's degree that I was able to start just like quietly pulling on threads. And it got to a point about halfway through my master's degree where I was able to realize, like something's not quite right here. And I knew I didn't want to uproot myself during the school program. So I knew I had to wait until I was done. But I was just asking enough questions. And literally 2 months after I got done with my master's degree, I picked up and moved my entire life here.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, kind of the rest is history a little bit. I mean, it morphed into what it is today. I didn't come here thinking I was going to work on religious trauma and like all that stuff. But people, like as I started healing, people just started ending up in my office. Again, not having language for it, but people just ended up in my office. It really wasn't until probably the 2016 elections that it became much more overt, where people were like, I don't know what to do. Like my parents, my friends, my this, my that, like we're seeing it on social media. They're talking about it in the office. And I was like, I don't really care what people think anymore. I'm going to just start telling people like, this is what I specialize in and I know something about it. So yeah,
That's amazing.
like the short, long version of
It's so interesting too, like moving to the South and getting into
way different.
Yeah, that's really, it reminds me of earlier when we were talking about like your clients will come in and like say something it'll hit, you know?
Oh yeah. I think we were talking earlier about just like how do you handle when your own stuff gets triggered? And I mean, normally I was saying like when my dad passed away, I had a client come to me for an intensive to heal from and grieve her dad. Yeah. And so it's like learning how to do that. But if you look at most specialties of therapists, it gives you a clue of what their own story is.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, this has been a long time, but that's just like, what does it look like to still have those little like, because Christianity is so like, it's not just believing in something. The goal is to get others. Did you still have those like pangs of like, oh, my old job was to convert you.
So funny.
My old job was to convert you.
So I was doing a podcast earlier today and I was like, I was a really bad Christian in that way.
Oh, really?
Like, I just was really bad at the conversion piece. Like I had no jewels on my crown in heaven. That was like the promise, you know, like if you convert people, you're going to get like jewels on your crown in heaven. Mine would have been bare.
What an insane, they're
right?
insane.
Yeah. I was, I was like very committed to the faith, but I'm a very relationship oriented person. And I feel like I've always been a good friend and a good listener and always the person that somebody could come to, but I was not going to share the gospel with you. Like,
I was kind of the same way. I'd be like, well, I'll share some of my experience.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. It was like, what was that like quote, like the St. Francis of Assisi quote that they're like, preach the gospel and if necessary, use words. And I was like, that's what I do.
I want that one.
I'll pay for you.
I was not a good Christian that way. So.
Okay, another question. So like in 2016, the same thing happened to me where I was like, whoa, the people that I was trusting had direct messages from God are saying insane shit. So then I turned and was like, fuck all Christians. Y'all are insane. I'm out. And then, I regained a relationship with like spirituality and a higher power. Did you go through that where you were like, Christianity, fuck all y'all?
Yeah. I mean, I think I tried to make it work for a long time. I think that I view the version of Christianity that I grew up in very similarly to an abusive relationship. So I think there's that natural process of like really trying to make it work, trying to piece it together. Okay, what if I try to do this? Or what if I try to do that? Or I try to morph myself this way or that way or whatever. And there really was a pivotal moment that I came to where I was like, okay, the goalpost is always moving. And I call it my Taylor Swift moment where I was like, we are just never, ever getting back together.
Damn.
It is just not going to happen. And I think that I, for myself, leave a very like open door to like, I don't know what exists in terms of like spirituality and higher power or whatever. And I am totally okay with that. I don't like labels. I've had a label on me for so many years and people ascribe so much meaning to that label that they put on that I'm so tired of that. I'm like, I will only put on the label of human. That is it. And I've explored other spiritual paths. I've explored other religions. I've explored progressive forms of Christianity and all the things. And like, I don't know, tomorrow it might change for me. And I just want the freedom and permission to do that because I'm so tired of being boxed in. I did that for so long. And I want to give myself and other people permission to just like be free to change it at any point that they want.
Yeah.
Badass, dude. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What a great thing.
Thanks. Yeah.
What's it look like when people come into your office? Because I know, like, I don't know, like, what's the journey there? It's probably so interesting and hard.
Yeah. I mean, I think as any therapist would say, like, it's never my job or our jobs to determine what somebody else's path is in terms of religion or spirituality. I am not anti-religion, but I am anti-harm, anti-power and control, anti-abuse, anti-oppression, anti any of the isms, you know, and so it's never my goal to get you to be that. I don't think that atheism is the cure for religious trauma.
Facts, yeah.
You know, I think religious trauma is trauma. So I'm going to treat it as trauma. The word religious just helps me better understand the context under which it happened. And so that gives me some clues to some of the recovery work that we'll be doing. But in terms of how it lives in your body, that's going to be the same, whether it happened, you know, in childhood or sexualized violence or war or natural disaster or complex trauma, whatever that is. And so, you know, if you're coming in going like, hey, this faith thing, this religion thing, this whatever is really important to me. Okay. Like, I'm going to help you explore that then. If there's things that really aren't working for you or that are harmful for you, we might need to bring that in and kind of navigate through that. My goal is going to help is to be able to help you make choices that are coming from a place of value and worth inside of you, like your own inherent goodness, rather than those external sources saying, here's what's right or good for you. And if you can do that and you want to make a choice to go to this church or that have this faith practice, okay. Like that is not, I do not want to be like the guru of somebody or the person to tell like, this is what you must or must not do with your faith or spiritual life. And yeah, like if I'm going to be telling somebody that, please fire me as your therapist or coach. I wouldn't, don't do that.
I think I'm going to have to book some sessions with you now.
I'll give you my card.
Yeah. Amazing. I have a question about how you feel. Well, first let me I know I'm just asking all the questions.
For it.
Okay, I've got the second one in my head, but the first one. Do you still talk to your parents?
I do.
Okay.
Minimally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've renegotiated a relationship with them.
Cool.
That works, you know, it's hard because I think in any high control religion, it is their identity. And so it's very hard to look outside of that because I think anybody who has their identity inside of a high control religion, if somebody's outside of that, they're like, oh, you don't believe this thing? That means you're against me. It's very hard to see anything outside of that. They're like, if you don't believe this, you don't believe me. And so it's hard for somebody inside of that, and it doesn't even have to be religion. It could be a high control group. It could be a high control cause. It could be like a high control social justice group. Yeah. A high control, any, you know, yogi.
See it everywhere.
Yeah.
You can see it anywhere. It's like, if you don't believe in this thing, you are against me. And anytime that happens, when we hold on to that so tight, it's like, oh, then you can't be a part of my life because now you're against me. And that's hard then to have a relationship like that. And so we have to find areas of commonality. And sometimes that makes it hard to have a deep relationship. So we talk about Survivor a lot.
The show. Yeah. That's, I was going to ask, like, because I know so many people that have like, that like what does it look like to what did it look like for you to renegotiate that relationship?
Sometimes it goes seasonally, to be totally honest. I think where I'm at right now, it's like I have areas where I'm like, I feel comfortable talking about these certain topics, but not these other topics. And so, I mean, I use the example of Survivor where it's like, hey, that's a TV show that I like. It's a TV show that they like. I will continue watching it because I know that they like to watch it. So then we have something to talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that, you know, and it sucks. And there's grief with that because it would be nice if we could have deeper conversations. And yet I know that that's not necessarily in the cards right now. And so that's just where we're at. Yeah. I know other people where it's like, hey, we can't even get to that point. And other people that have said, hey, we can actually go further past that point because we've been able to find areas of connection that don't include religion or religious topics, or where we've been able to like approach each other with curiosity and compassion, and it doesn't turn into a fight or having to kind of like butt heads against one another. But that takes both parties to be able to do that.
Yeah. And this, it's okay if you don't want to answer this, if this is personal, but if like your parents, if they do the like trying to save you, you know, because they might think you're going to hell or something, and they like slip it in where they're like, how you doing? You've prayed, you know? How do you respond to that? Because that's like, for some people, that's an everyday conversation where they're trying to save you again.
Yeah. I was really clear with my entire family several years ago that I wasn't interested in having those conversations. Do I know that they pray for me? Yes. For me personally, I don't get offended by that. I know that that's something that's important to them, and they aren't overt with it. My parents will say from time to time, we're praying for you or whatever. And I'm like, you know what? I know that that's their way of saying they care about me. Where I'm at in my own journey, I can handle that.
Yeah.
I think there probably would have been a time 10 years ago where I would have been like, seriously, like I would have been more offended by that. But where I'm at right now, it's fine. But I was really clear with my entire family, like, hey, here's where I'm at. And I'm open to conversations as long as they are conversations met with curiosity from both sides. I'm not interested in proselytizing. I'm not interested in convincing. I'm not going to try to convince you of my side, nor do I want you to convince me of my side. This is a two-sided street.
Right.
And for the most part, they've respected that. But I think part of it is they've watched me model that. And so I've been really, really intentional to show up with kindness and with compassion. I don't like try to pull their children aside and like do witchcraft for them or something like that.
Yeah, right.
You know, like I just show up and I try to like be a loving aunt and like be interested in them, and that's worked.
That's amazing
yeah.
that they were receptive to that, and that you like stood up for yourself like that.
Thank you.
That's a gift, truly.
Yeah. And I do know that not everybody has been lucky enough to have that experience. So
yeah, you were gonna ask a question. Did you remember it? I was gonna be like, Melanie, remember it?
Yes. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what do you think contributes to that mentality of like, if we're not the same, you're against me. That isn't just in high control, but in all these different environments that we find. And especially everything just feels so polarizing like that. And I'm just curious your thoughts on why do you think that is like become our culture and how we just are in relationship with people a lot of times?
Yeah, I think it gives us the illusion of safety. I call it like fun. It's like a very fundamentalist way of thinking, which is very binary, black and white, right or wrong, good or bad. And I really think fundamentalism is a coping mechanism for a dysregulated nervous system. And so when we say, here's like the list of like the good or the right or the wrong or whatever, it gives us this illusion of like, as long as I kind of stay in this lane, then I'm
okay.
safe. I'm okay. And it kind of gives me a measuring stick for everybody else as well. And so then if you're in the other category, bad, evil, you know, whatever it is, it gives kind of that disparity.
It's threatening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So then there's a couple things that happen. Like, okay, now like you're dangerous. So I'm automatically like my nervous system tells me you're dangerous. So I'm going to have like a natural physiological response. And that's also probably going to give me some subconscious permission to do things, say things, respond to things in a way that treats you as such. Even if I can't totally articulate it.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think I love that you put it in the nervous system context because we really do experience things that way. But also I think when we don't know who we are and that's what has defined you, the threat becomes not just I perceive we're different. It's, if I think about something other than this context I've built, I have to figure out who I am then. And it's just a threat to crumble, for everything to crumble.
Yeah.
If you open up to another perspective. And I see that a lot. And it's very hard. Like sometimes clients come in, would not name spiritual abuse or trauma as something. But then how do you handle when, I mean, you may have more people, that's what they're coming to you directly for. But if you work from a holistic perspective, you're considering a spiritual self. And so some may not recognize it, but then you start hearing different environments. Maybe it's not even the religious piece, but just family structure.
Yeah. So are you asking like, how do
you bring that in to say like, here's something to, it's, you can just see it so blaringly, but they're not naming it.
I think one of the things truly that is so hard is like anytime you use the word abuse, it is such a jarring, like, people are automatically going to be very defensive because there's such a specific kind of like, people are like, no way. Like, unless it's these very kind of like bombastic acts. Yeah. And I think like with spiritual abuse, they're like, oh, well, my pastor didn't sexually abuse me or, this or that. I know like in the context of like religion, some of my colleagues and I came up with some different language to use for that reason, because people are like, no, that's not spiritual abuse. And we're like, okay, well, how does the term adverse religious experience land on you? And they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. It's an adverse religious experience. We're like, okay, cool. That works then. Let's just use that. And that to them feels like that can help them organize their experience. So sometimes when I'm working with clients, I personally don't get caught up so much in like the actual naming of it, because if that is what throws them off and they're like, I can't call it that, and that dysregulates me so much that I can't actually do the work. I'm like, that's cool. Like, and prior to working with religious trauma, I worked mostly with domestic violence. So I saw it a lot when it's like you pull out the power and control wheel and they're like, well, shit, that's my relationship, but I can't call it that, and then they walk out and you never see them again. And it's like, okay, well, can we just like start to notice patterns, and can we start to ask them to be curious, and what would happen? Like, what do you think? Does that feel okay to you? What would happen if you reverse the roles? Would that be okay? And start to get them to think for themselves and turn on some critical thinking and curiosity. Yeah. Because oftentimes they're able to say like, oh, actually that wouldn't be okay. Or that's not maybe the most compassionate approach. And getting them in that way. Maybe they'll never call it spiritual abuse or spiritual harm. And I think that sometimes can be more helpful rather than having to name it a specific thing.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah.
Do you ever have people come in that like grew up like super atheist or agnostic? Like instead of like like it was so intense in that way?
I mean, I know people in my personal life that grew up like a religious or but not really that have had like the types of experiences that people
like
in high control religions
got you
come out of. Yeah.
Okay.
But people that have come out of like more spiritual, like high control spiritual groups or groups kind of like wellness groups that aren't necessarily attached to religious groups. Like a friend of mine was in the sex cult NXIVM. She did not grow up religious at all, but was in like the wellness group NXIVM, so they don't promote like a specific religion, but they have this whole wellness plan and it's very culty.
She's out of it now?
Yes.
Wow. How do you feel about like, I feel like there's been, especially on Netflix, just an uptick of, it's like a trend now to just consume all the documentaries about, how do you feel about that? Do you think it's helpful or just insane?
Both. Yeah, I get exhausted myself because I'm like, another one.
Right.
Because then I'm like expected to talk about it, and I'm like, hey guys, it's the same thing again.
Yeah.
But like on the one hand, it's great because like there's so much awareness that's being brought to it, and like the word is getting out and people are starting to understand dynamics of power and control within cults and within high control systems and relationships. And I think it's so necessary. And also it is the exact same playbook and there is not a single bit of creativity. It is 100% the same story every time.
That's wild.
And it's so funny. And I'm sure you've seen this too. Like, okay, so I said I started working with domestic violence clients and then I, worked whatever. And it's all the same playbook. So whether it's like a narcissist or domestic violence or high control group or whatever, they all operate the same. And my clients sometimes think I have superpowers because I can like predict. I'm like,
how'd you know?
Yeah, I'm like, oh, so when you go home, like this is probably going to happen this week, and then they come back and they're like, how did you know?
Wow.
I'm like, well, it's really not hard to like. This is what's going to happen.
That hurts my
next.
heart.
Yeah,
that they're like, what? And they think it's like a unique experience.
Yeah, yeah. And so on the one hand, it's this like balance, and whether this is a singular like individual or if it's a group. On the one hand, it's important to validate, your experience is unique to you. And on the other hand, it's important for them to know it's actually very, very common.
Like not alone.
Yes,
Yeah.
so that you're not alone. Because that is one thing that perpetrators of these types of systems try to convince you is that you're the problem, you are alone, you caused this.
And they isolate you.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can't really get any other information to know that's not true.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you become the enemy as the therapist. That's when they start coming
Yeah.
with new
Or the family
information. They're
member or
like,
the
that's an
friend."
awful therapist. You need to change therapy. Go to a Christian therapist.
God.
Yes, which, and we should not be shocked that the research even tells us that there is a very high correlation between women who are in high control religions and staying in domestically violent relationships. The likelihood that you will stay is much higher.
Yeah. How did you get into domestic?
My own experience.
Okay. Yeah.
Actually, I didn't really know I was in a domestically violent. I laugh now. It's not funny, but it is now. I'm like, oh, duh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. But yeah. And that was really one of the most pivotal moments for me was like, I was looking at my journals one night and I'd already kicked him out of our home. And I was looking at my journals and I was like, I don't know who said what. Was it him or was it like God, the pastors, the leadership? I was like, I cannot tell if he said it or if they said it. And I was like, this is really interesting. I'm going to need to research this after I start healing.
Wow. This was before like you had given up on the church, like that
Yeah, I was already out of the church. Like I had stopped going to church at that point. Not long. I mean, I was like maybe less than a year, but I was already out of the church at that
But he
point.
was a Christian.
Yes. I mean, by word.
Well, yeah.
Probably not by action.
Yeah. So my mom was in a domestic violence like relationship. And for a while there, she was like, had this dream of going to talk to different women and, like she's a writer and she just wanted, and then she like tried it a little bit and was like, I can't do this because no one listens to me. Like they're all just like, you see them, like kind of like you said, you see them for a second and then you never see them again.
Yeah.
They won't listen. And so she gave up on that. But like, as a therapist, how do you guys deal with that? Like, how do you deal with that?
Well, as an intern, they want you to kind of, at least where I did mine, they were like, what's something you don't want to work with? And very quickly, domestic violence became that for me because it is a very different ballgame. And the goal's not always to get them to, like, my instinct was like, girl, let's leave.
Right.
Like, what you doing, And that's not how you go about that. It's some of it's very slow and sitting in and helping them be the healthiest, boundaried, safest version of their life they can in the relationship, hoping they do leave. And helping them support that, hoping as they become more aware, they are able to do that.
Right.
But it's just
Too hard.
Yeah. I was like, I can't sit in it with them. I would get frustrated and be like, I can't help. And I was an intern, so I never really, you have clients who have that going on when they come to you for trauma. And so, you know how to deal with it, but it was hard for me. That was a struggle for me to do that. So she's going to be able to answer better.
Tell me what the question was again. It's like how to go through it.
How do you deal with like,
how do you deal with like
Yeah, I mean, you really just, it is so slow. It is one step forward, 12 steps back for real. It's long suffering. I think part of the reason I can do it is because I do have that in my own history. And so I understand how painful it is to get out of it. And so I just know it takes a long time and it's not, I understand the mind control that goes on. And it's not because somebody is weak or because they're wanting to be in pain or that they're wanting to be controlled or abused or anything like that. I know how hard they're trying and how they're wanting that person to change and everything like that. And it's like the most long suffering thing ever. And I know that there will be a point that they get to and then it's go time.
Yeah.
And I know exactly how to get them to that point and then what to do next.
let's freaking go.
I know.
that's a gift, I think, in therapists, like that you can do that and walk in that. Like it's,
it's not for everybody. And that's not like a bad thing I mean, all of us are gifted in different ways. And so some people, I mean, some people can, like that is their gift. Some people it's not. And it's just, you just have to know like what is your type of client. But in the same way, like that's also why I can work with the clients I work with now too. I mean, it's a very similar dynamic. So I don't really see much of a difference.
It's so it's so like such a big thing that I don't think is talked about enough. Where like when I'll say my mom's story, people will be like, well, "Why didn't she leave?" It's just like the most annoying question.
It's the wrong question.
What is the right question? What?
Oh, I would say just to not even ask that.
Yes.
To just be like,
so sorry.
It's so offensive.
I think I understand why people ask it. And people ask that a lot with like cults, with religion, stuff like that too. But I think it just shows that you don't understand the dynamic of that relationship or that system or that church, because it's not a matter of like, oh, I'm going to just like not show up at that church, or I'm going to not, I'm going to just like stop dating this person, or I'm going to divorce this person or end the relationship. We're talking about a dynamic of power and control.
Yes.
You don't just stop. You don't believe that you can survive outside of that relationship or that system. It's so psychologically damaging.
And they've pulled you away from all of your resources.
Absolutely.
To where you have nothing.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, what you just said. You don't think you can survive out of that relationship. I mean, that's like, I think someone could connect to that. Like, why don't you just leave your house that has, or something that you're attached to? Just leave it. It's like, well, no, I can't, you know?
Yeah. And that, I feel like I've had so many women that maybe got out of that, and then that I started working with them, and they just want to understand why they stay. Like they don't understand it for themselves, but they're like, they want to know like, why couldn't I leave? Or why did I get into another relationship like this?
Right.
Or especially when they look and see they experienced it. They're like, did I not learn my lesson as a child?
Right.
And that is a lot of first step, I think, for them, is to try to understand themselves and what created those dynamics. And like religion can play a big role in that. I know I'm kind of winding around, but I want to hear your perspective around, because I've worked with clients that have gotten out of a cult, and they're so used to that control factor to manage themselves and know that that's when they find themselves jumping into other high control things that they don't realize are high control.
Like what?
You name it. Peloton.
Veganism.
Yes. Like so many different
interesting.
things like that. It could be some different other branded form of religion. But even with themselves, like, I just the way they kind of structure their daily life and their thoughts even. And so, how to help Because I know there's people that are listening right now that are in that spot.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to that idea of fundamentalism, when we have these prescribed rules of living, right? It's a prescription. We are not taught how to think. We're taught what to think.
Yeah.
There's no critical thinking. There's no curiosity. So when we get out of a system like that, we don't just magically understand how to navigate the world, how to think about things, how to make choices, how to, just like think through anything, right? We're like put out into the world and we're like, I don't know how to literally do anything in so many cases. Yeah, absolutely. And that is, on the one hand, extremely liberating. And on the other hand, terrifying. Because now I'm out in this world and have zero skills of how to navigate it. And so then we hear somebody on social media or on TV or on a podcast or whatever, and they say, I have the answer. Follow this plan, do this thing.
Damn.
And that sounds incredibly helpful. That gives us a sense of certainty, even if it's
And they're
the
getting
illusion.
pulled into people with a similar experience.
Right. Right. I call it like embodied fundamentalism. Right. So we gravitate towards that, not because we're looking to be controlled, not because we actually want to be under somebody else, but because we go,
Feels familiar.
we that's functional dysfunction, right? We gravitate as humans towards what is familiar. I don't know how to live. This person is giving me a set of rules of how to live. And before we know it, we're back under the control of somebody or something, or a 12-step plan of what we're supposed to do. And oh shoot, now I'm in another group or another culture, another system, or another person. And it's we could call it grooming, even like that. High control religion can groom us to be in other systems like that. I mean, I know when I got out, I didn't like formally join any sort of other group, but I can look back now and I can see how I really, gravitated towards like wellness culture and like cleanses and detoxes and all these things that just had these promises attached to them that if you follow this thing step by step by step, if you take all these supplements, if you do this cleanse, then you're going to get this like perfect result. But if you don't do it perfectly, it's your fault and you're not going to get this thing. And I was like, I was just repeating the same thing over and over and over. And I'm like, oh, well, now I know why I did that. Like I didn't have any other skills or tools available to me. So I just repeated what I'd already been doing. And kind of like when I knew better, I did better.
Yeah.
But there was a period of years where I was like, you say you have an answer and it sounds better than what I came out of. So, okay, I will follow that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started to get in tune with my own body and being able to listen to myself and developing self-compassion and getting attuned to my nervous system and doing trauma work that I was like, oh, I actually have like inner wisdom and a sense of guidance and like these sorts of things. But you don't have that just simply coming out of a high control religion or relationship or anything like that. So of course we just go, who's like the coolest dude on the block?
Yeah.
You, okay. You've got the biggest Instagram following or people are talking about you the most. That's who I'll follow. Because I need somebody to tell me what to do or where to go or what to read or listen to. And you look good. I'll go for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you suggest to people that are just coming out but realizing that they might do that? Is it just like lead with curiosity? Like ask yourself at every point, like, does this feel good?
And if somebody says they have the answer.
Yeah. stay away from people who are like, I've got the key for you.
Do this thing. Yeah.
Gotcha.
That comes to anything. Doctors, therapists, whatever.
Yeah. I think if anybody is trying to pull you away from yourself and get you to follow them, that should be a red flag. If somebody says, like, hey, listen to yourself, that's like a good thing.
Yeah. Pointing you back to yourself versus saying they know you.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. I think that's huge. It's hard because when you are traumatized, curiosity isn't available to you very much,
Right.
or at all. It really isn't. They're kind of the opposite of each other. So it's hard to be able to say like, okay, check in with yourself and be curious, because what is that even? But I think that, like if you can at least give yourself some like diversify the voices.
Yeah.
You know, like that is a way to be curious, even if you can't check in with yourself. I think maybe that's, you know, like let's start in ways like that. Like, don't just follow one person. If you're going to go onto social media and look for some answers, look for answers from like 10 to 15 people. Don't just look from one. Like, are there, you know, like a bunch of different things that are being said? Are you noticing themes? Like, oh gosh, everybody keeps saying this like nervous system thing, this body-based trauma thing. Like maybe that's something I could check into, not just looking at this like one person who keeps saying ice baths, you know, like, I don't know, you know, like,
facts. Yeah.
right.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yes.
I would say like, that's a good way to be curious. Nothing against ice baths.
No,
if you
no.
want to do them, you know, like, but it's like,
There's always a thing on trend.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There is. And so, yeah, like that could be a way to, if you can't have access, or if you don't have access to yourself, to be like tuning in, like, can we just be like mentally curious of
Love
like
that.
diversifying?
Great
Yeah.
advice.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm really good at, I'm just kidding.
No, you are. You're very like great with your words. You're very wise. Like
Thanks.
I like listening to you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. I want to ask, we have to start wrapping up, but I love you.
Aw.
I do. I think you're wonderful. I'm so
you.
glad you're on this earth. When I'm on this earth,
Really
such a
makes
gift.
it
Oh, I'm going to cry. Yeah. I'm grateful for her.
That's cute.
What made you want to write a book?
Well, okay, so a couple things. I've always wanted to write a book.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's always been like writing has always been like my spiritual practice, like journaling and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And it's just always been something I've wanted to do. I just didn't know how I was going to do it. And so I had my person who's now my agent reached out to me maybe 6 months before my dissertation was done. And she was like, hey, I've been following you for a while. Do you want to write a book? I was like, yes, but I'm opening a company, building a house, and finishing my doctoral work, like literally all within like a few months of each other. Could you check back with me, you know, like maybe give me a month after
Yes.
all that is done? She must have had a scheduled email because it was like literally 1 month after that.
Wow.
And she's like, yeah, so are you thinking of writing a book? I was like, I am. And here's what my thoughts are. She goes, that's great, but I think you need to write about this instead. And she was not wrong.
Wow.
So yeah, it was great. I actually used a lot of my doctoral research to write this book that I ended up writing, which was really great because it was a very seamless transition. And yeah, so I took everything and kind of, I made it so that it could be used kind of like in an academic sense, in a clinical sense, and then like as like a layman, you know, kind of just the everyday person. And I wrote it kind of for all three audiences. And
Amazing.
yeah, it ended up, I think, turning out okay.
Oh,
So,
what was your like emotional journey? Were you nervous? Were you excited? Were you both?
I was both. Because I think as a writer, and I'm sure as any sort of artist, like you have those moments where you're like, I mean, really, is it that important?
Right.
And then you like you have the moments where you're like, yeah, I think it is. But it really wasn't until I did the audiobook and I got done with it and you kind of like hear it back and you're like, oh, yeah, like I said some smart things.
Oh, let's
That's
go.
how I was with this. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, seeing some things y'all clip up.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, well, that was neat.
That's good.
Yeah, I didn't hear that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a really fun process of doing that. And yeah, so it was good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Go- What's the book title again?
When Religion Hurts You.
Oh,
Yeah.
and you did the audiobook?
I did.
Fun.
Yes.
You have a good voice for that.
Yes.
You. Yeah, it was really fun to do. I did it actually when I was up in Minnesota. I decided to just randomly go to Minnesota for a month last summer, which is, obviously where I'm originally from. And the guy who is the producer on it, like we grew up at the same, obviously not together, but like he went to high school at the same time I did. So he was like very culturally familiar with like some of the things I was talking
amazing.
about. And so it was just like fun to have somebody who understood some of like the cultural points or whatever. And yeah, he was just so great to work with. There's a couple parts in the book where I cry every time and I don't love crying in front of people, which, whatever. but I just like sobbed, and he was so just patient. I was like, oh my God, I'm growing as a person.
What a treat. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so it was great. He was so wonderful to work with, and I loved it. So
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So excited about it. Yeah.
As you should be.
Thank you.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any more questions?
I don't think so. I'm sure I'll have more later.
I know. I know.
Text me.
Yes.
Aw, cuties.
I do have one. It's
Yeah.
just sometimes I see religion when, we talk about attachment and like with parents and like how that affects that. And I tend to see when there's a religious piece that going on, it's almost like a third parent.
Yeah.
I was curious your thoughts on that.
So there's a therapist that does a lot with this. His name is Crispin Mayfield, and he wrote a book called Attached to God or Attachment to God. I can't remember what it's called. He talks a lot about it more. So
I
some
feel like
people,
it can like influence
Yes.
like how you are in relationship with yourself and other people in the same way like parents can.
I look at it kind of two ways, like the attachment piece as it pertains to God and parents and everything. As God as an attachment figure, like in terms of, okay, perhaps like I don't have a strong attachment relationship with my parents and God becomes my stable attachment figure. I've heard clients, friends, colleagues talk about it that way. They found that there's actually a feeling of safety or security. And then later on have felt a significant rupture. Like here's this attachment figure that I thought I had. And now it turns out that I didn't have a safe attachment. And that can be really devastating. And there's a lot of grief there. I've heard that way. I've also heard a lot of people that will say, I feel like because of the way that the church or religion taught my parents how to parent, I wasn't able to have a safe and stable attachment with my parents. They just simply did not show up in that way. And so therefore I was never modeled some of those, like what we would call like typical developmental milestones and things like that. So, I mean, that's like a whole other, thing to unpack as well.
No, thank you for sharing. That was something I blocked in my brain. I was like, I'm curious your thoughts on that.
I wrote about it a bit in my book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So tell everybody where to find you and where to find your book.
Awesome. Yeah. So my book is available wherever books are sold. Of course, I always recommend the local bookstore or your library, of course. My website is Dr. Laura E. Anderson, and that's where you can find me on social media across all platforms, Dr. Laura E. Anderson. My company is the Center for Trauma Resolution and Recovery. And we've got coaches that can see you. They've got free inquiry calls. It's traumaresolutionandrecovery.com, and that's where we are on social media as well. I think that's everything. And my book is When Religion Hurts You. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming.
I'm so glad you guys had me on. Thank you.
I just feel like a little kid, like, I'm just so grateful for you. Yes.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Our pleasure. Thank you for listening to I'm Fine, It's Fine podcast. My name is Amber Autry. I'm a comedian based here in Nashville and internationally touring. You can find me on all platforms at Amber Autry Comedy.
And I am Melanie Reese. I'm a trauma therapist here in Nashville. You can find me across all platforms at Trauma Therapy Nashville.
We really appreciate you listening so much. And if you want to give a little extra for free, make sure you're liking, subscribing, rating, reviewing, sharing with your friends, talking about it to literally everyone you see, because it helps so much. And we're so grateful for the extra effort.
And if you like what you're hearing and you want some bonus material, that includes interviews with other practitioners and all the juicy stuff that Amber and I talk about that doesn't go into the normal podcast. We'd love to have you subscribe. You can find the link in our bio, and $5 a month, you can do it.
Thank you.
Thanks.